please help us welcome two special guests, Merlin Hepworth, slam poet, and Lance Johnson, who will be creating a work of art you'll be seeing again.
What's up, everyone? Hello. My name is Merlin Hepworth, and I'm gonna start this off by offering a poem. I've had the distinguished opportunity and fortune to do a lot of arts and education programming across the country, internationally, in group homes, in schools, and in prisons. And this piece is about an experience working, teaching a writing workshop for incarcerated men, adults in this instance. So, it is not uncommon in my line of work to witness a child shake as they read a poem for the first time inside of a classroom. But yesterday, I was not inside of a classroom. Yesterday, I was inside of a federal prison on the yard where self-proclaimed paisas, peckerwoods, and crips conduct business against the backdrop of razor wire fences. On this particular occasion, inmates listened as 16 of the 35 men I taught in poetry workshops the previous week spilled their stories onto a single microphone. And the last to read was a man named C. His legs shook with nerves. His neck scar, glamorous enough to be featured on TV during a special about gangs. C's bullet scars dip like fingers in wet sand against his body. I stand and watch as he reads. He is the shyest light in my classroom of convicts, where the eyes of these men follow me each day as I write on the board, a dim glow trapped in their gazes, concealing all the caged memories of their childhoods, where the majority of them were raised to believe that they were mistakes. And a few bad choices along the way landed them in this place. Seems like their whole lives been misshaped somehow. C's legs shake with purpose, nervous as he speaks about his life. He is deathly afraid of what we're all afraid of. Exposing ourselves in front of a set of eyes that just might redefine us with their judgment. Explaining ourselves to a room of people who may not listen, who may not understand, who just might dismiss our humanity by labeling us bad or no good, or bad and no good, or dangerous, or black and dangerous and bad and no good, or poor, or less, or poor, or less, or disposable like a body in Ferguson, Missouri. If only you could see all of our reflections trapped in the tremble rushing through C's veins as each word tumbled out of his mouth like a gas canister filled with tulips, like hollowed out grenades filled with lilacs, thumping through the eardrums of 1,000 inmates standing on the yard, standing and listening. Yeah, listening, an audience as warm as any room of humans willing to love. So it's super good to be here. Thank you for having me, truly, honestly. Lots of people are here. I don't know any of you, but I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're participating in what is very, very important. I've dedicated my entire life, really my entire adult life, to working with young people. I run a small emerging nonprofit, and our mission is to create spaces for young people to find, develop, and publicly present their voices. And I'm here with you today. Yeah, thank you. That's cool. It is good. Yeah. And I'm here with you today taking a small pause from a program we have running down the street at Durango Juvenile Detention. And I'm so happy that these things exist because you know and I know that if it's not for strong leadership with adults, if it's not for dynamic academies, schools, and programming, we don't have the fabric of society that we need. So I'm gonna read a short, tiny teacher poem. Is that cool? And I feel like the educators in the room might really get this one, but what you realize is when you work with young people, they present you with, some of them, tremendous amounts of challenges. And your victories, it's so much more than the math or the science or the English or the poetry or the thing you're teaching with them. What you're doing most of the time is you're building a rapport. You're trying to build trust, especially in communities where there's folks who lack that trust. So this is about teaching at a school in Arizona. It's very short. It goes like this. I teach Daisy poetry at an elementary school in Phoenix where most 9-year-olds have parents that dress the Somali way and tell stories the Bosnian way and cook food the Mexican way. Parents that live the way they once lived someplace else, hiding with children in their arms. Daisy is embarrassed to say her last name because I am a teacher and this is a school where few can pronounce the last names of students. I fail to hear her, but repeat her name back correctly, Bujorquez. And she smiles with that smile I can't keep her from hiding with their hands. Thank you. So, I grew up in Idaho. Dang, I don't know. I grew up in Idaho, and shout outs if you're from there, but I grew up in a small town as a biracial kid, as a millennial kid, and I had to deal with what you might expect, being one of the only kids of color in my entire town, right? And I had this incredible teacher, and her name was Mrs. Mack, and she was the nerdiest, like, white lady. And she had these, like, Coke bottle glasses, like, and she was like, she did probably the most important thing that ever happened to me in my life. Is she asked me to stay after class one day. And she said, and she did this really incredible thing. She goes, Merlin, I need you to understand that when you participate in my classroom, other people learn. And it helps all of us learn. And the reason why this was impactful was because I had no idea. I had good days, I had bad days. I was like any other kid. And I didn't know I was making a difference to the community. In fact, sometimes I didn't even really feel like I existed, so she acknowledged me for that moment, and she asked me to participate. And she said, you are visible. She said, I see you. And she was really instrumental because one of the things she did is she encouraged my poetry in class, right? She encouraged me to write, and she was one of the only white folks that I knew in my small town, right? Where my mother got dirty looks at the grocery store for speaking Spanish. In my small town where, like, whenever my mother played, Alfredo Jimenez outside when we were doing chores, we got looks. In my small town, she said, I wrote about that. I wrote about a fight I got into because some kid was making fun of, whatever, right? Had these disparaging comments about my mom or where we came from or whatever. And I wrote this poem about it, and I was nervous, man. I was super scary. I was scared because what I knew at that time is that I didn't want to tell my mother that, yeah, I was having these racially charged instances at school because I wanted to protect my mother from knowing. When she dropped us off, when she dealt with comments all the time. She dealt with it all the time. And I wanted to have access and go places. So I didn't want to tell my mother. And if I told my father, my father was tough white dude. He was gonna handle somebody. Like, it would have been a problem at that school. So I didn't want to say anything, but I was going through this very, very deep, uncomfortable thing. And Miss Mack, I wrote this poem, and Miss Mack read it, and I was so scared because it was about this thing called race, this racial incident, and no one around me was talking about it. And felt like it was just me going through this thing. And she said, you know what, Merlin? What you did right there was brave. What you did right there has value. And what she did in that moment is she gave me an opportunity and a pathway to heal. And so I started writing poems, and she goes, that's so great, Merlin, keep writing. You can write about whatever you need to, whatever you're going through. And it was how I processed my pain. It was how I got through. It's how I understood that I have brown folks that love me and shelter me, and white folks that love me and shelter me, and people from all over that sheltered and loved me, and that all kinds of people were capable of inflicting pain. She taught me those things. She gave me that roadmap by saying, yes, speak. And so I'm very honored to be here to share this with you. Last night, I fell asleep listening to the Notorious B.I.G., reading Word Up magazine. I had a dream where Tupac appeared to me on a beach in Malibu. He stared at me, and I found myself transfixed. Each bullet wound on his chest bloomed, stigmatas pulsing Virgin Mary roses, and I wondered, why are we in Malibu? As each wave crashed and broke against the shore, thousands of Tupac lyrics scrawled across the sky and hushed against the sand. And before I had time to gasp, Tupac snatched me up and began carrying me on his back. I hoped we were going to Thug Mansion. But as I stared at the endless Malibu beach beyond me, I finally found the courage to ask. I said, Pac, why are you carrying me on a beach in Malibu? He asked, do you remember what I meant when I said thug life? And I said, Pac, damn, I don't know. I remember, though, when I was 16, I crashed my car singing, ever since I was a youngster, causing ruckus on the back of the bus. I was a fool all through high school, kicking up dust. And to be honest, Pac, I fled the scene of that accident. It was a hit and run. It was a parked car. No one got hurt, but when I ran, I could hear you in my head, Pac. I was like, picture me rolling in my 500 Benz. I got no love for these cars. Ain't no need to be friends. Pac said, but do you remember what I meant when I said thug life? I said, I don't know, Pac, but I remember as soon as you step on the scene, you're hearing women screaming. Pac said, first off, yo, script in the click you claim, and bam, Tupac threw me in the ocean. He said, you must remember thug life. I landed in the ocean, I thought I drowned. But instead I came to on the beach, I looked around and I said, Pac. But Tupac was gone. In his absence, there was only one set of footprints in the sand. And I wondered how long Tupac had carried me. I realized it was perhaps the entire length of my adolescence. I remember that for Tupac, thug life was an acronym that meant the hate you give little infants fucks everyone. I remember they scattered his ashes on a beach in Malibu. I remember he wrote a song that said, picture me and Biggie in heaven with a blunt and a brew. I remember Tupac's voice was so large and versatile on an instrumental that his presence was larger than Shaquille O'Neal. I remember Tupac was only 5'8". I remember being 16 and afraid, being 16 in a rage of confusion and pain. I remember blasting pressing his voice in my headphones and tucking my face into my hoodie. I remember Tupac's voice, hopeless and hopeful, vulnerable and triumphant. I remember his complicated grief spoke volumes to me. Yeah, I remember Tupac, and it felt like wherever he was in the afterlife, that he always knew me. Thank you. All right, this is from my father. When I was a boy, I wanted to have green eyes, aqua tangled blue water green eyes. Now, I didn't want to have green eyes because I developed some type of shame about having brown ones. Nah, I wanted green eyes because I liked the Ninja Turtles and the Ninja Turtles were green. I wanted green eyes because I grew up on rivers that spilled as open and as free as my limbs under the brim of a sun, riding on top of my father's shoulders, mesmerized by mountains and valleys. I realized I wanted green eyes because my father's eyes were green. I used to watch him, his hands and arms twice the size of mine, handing me a basketball, tying my shoes. I would watch as he would jump into the truck with other men, giants who told me one day I would be like them. And just last June, I felt my father's age tremble in my palm as I helped him up a hillside. We drank cold water from the same cup, the love in his gaze, a sight I won't soon take for granted. Imagine in 8th grade, I was embarrassed of my dad. He was loud and obnoxious and intellectual and unlike the other dads. I left home at 17. And just last week, my father spoke to me about that day, how he was loading groceries into his car, how unexpectedly green his eyes wept without restraint over the absence of his only living son. Not everything about my father is good, but there is merit in his stride, and he's been hell-bent and heaven-sent on providing all he can to contribute to the lives of his children. And these days, I don't want green eyes. I like mine just fine, a perfect splash of my mother and father combined. Besides, my father's eyes aren't really green. There's too much miracle rippling inside of them to ever be labeled just one thing. I've seen them slate and gray over my grandfather's grave. I've seen them hazy, hazel, magenta blaze, handing me a basketball, tying my shoes. I've seen them misty jade river water blue. There are lifetimes and legacies behind their shine. And I'm compelled to believe that the source of that light will always reside here. That's my time, y'all. Thank you so much for having me.